An RF jet with the UK Defence Secretary on board had its signal jammed as it flew near the Russian border earlier this week. John Healey was travelling back to the UK on Thursday after visiting British soldiers in Estonia when the incident happened, the Times first reported. Oil prices have fallen sharply and Asian stock markets have risen on hopes of a deal that could bring an end to the US-Israel war with Iran. On Saturday, US President Donald Trump said an agreement with Tehran had been largely negotiated and details would be announced soon, but the following day urged his negotiating team not to rush a deal.
Victor Wembanyama has scored 33 points to lead the San Antonio Spurs in a 103-82 rout of Oklahoma City and level the NBA Western Conference Finals at 2 games each, 2.24 meters, center shot 11 of 22 from the floor, 3 of 7 from three-point range, and added 8 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 blocked shots and 2 steals in 31 minutes for the Spurs on Sunday.
Pakistani and Chinese companies signed agreements and memorandums of understanding worth more than $7 billion during a business-to-business investment conference in Hangzhou, China, as Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif invited Chinese firms to relocate industries to Pakistan and expand joint ventures with local companies. The agreements were signed at the Pakistan-China B2B investment conference, which focused on information technology and telecom, battery energy storage systems and agriculture.
Rawalpindi Development Authority, RDA, has decided to develop markets and commercial plazas on vacant plots and open spaces located within its housing schemes in Rawalpindi. The decision was taken during a meeting chaired by Commissioner Rawalpindi Abdul Amar Khatak and attended by senior RDA officials, including Additional Director General Masood Ahmad and Chief Engineer Anwar Baran.
National Database and Registration Authority, NADRA, has introduced new rules for the issuance of computerized national identity cards. CNICs, making signatures optional for first-time applicants under the revised regulations. Applicants applying for a CNIC for the first time will not be required to provide a signature. NADRA said that in cases where no signature is submitted, NA will be entered in the signature field on the CNIC.
Travis Head and his wife Jessica have been subjected to a barrage of online abuse after the Australian cricketer was embroiled in a spat with India great Virat Kohli during an Indian Premier League IPL match. The players clashed during the T20 match between Head's Sunrisers Hyderabad and Kohli's Royal Challengers Bengaluru on Friday. Born to landless Indian farmers, Sunil Ponia thought a job at sea would be his ticket out of poverty. Instead, his first voyage saw him diving into the ocean to escape a deadly attack driven by the US-Israel war on Iran. For hundreds of thousands of Indians, merchant shipping jobs are a lucrative proposition despite the inherent risks. Toshifumi Suzuki, the founder of 7-Eleven Japan and widely regarded as the father of Japan's convenience store industry, died of heart failure on May 18, 7&I Holdings said on Monday. He was 93. Born in Nagano in 1932, Suzuki joined retailer Ito Yokado in 1963 after working at a book wholesaler. Defying skepticism at the time, Suzuki partnered with Southland Corp, the US operator of 7-Eleven, to launch 7-Eleven Japan in 1973, opening the first store in Tokyo the following year. The federal government has decided to establish a dedicated WAPTA security force to protect key water sector infrastructure projects across the country, along with workers associated with them, particularly Chinese nationals involved in major developments. The new force is being created through the proposed WAPTA Security Force Act 2026, which has already been forwarded to Parliament. Rawalpindi. A security and discipline unit has been established by the police to ensure prompt deployment of personnel to the designated points and the protection of police officials during the May 30 cricket match between Australia and Pakistan at the Pindi Cricket Stadium. According to sources, the purpose of setting up the unit was to ensure the security of the police force in the prevailing security situation. The special unit will keep a close cordon around the police force during its transportation, departure and gathering.
Islamabad.
The Pakistan Stock Exchange's PSX benchmark index began the week on a strong on Monday, gaining 3,800 points during early trading and was at 171,438 points at 9:30 a.m. compared to Friday's close of 167,804.24 points. By 9:39 a.m., the index had slightly dipped to 270,714 points.
Alia, whose name we have changed for her safety, travelled hundreds of miles from her village to Kabul to escape marriage, the journey by taxi last year with their eyes visible cousin, as the rules decree, was an exceptional thing to do and risky in Afghanistan, where at any moment they might be caught by the Taliban inspectors enforcing rules banning women travelling long distances without a male relative escorting them.
Rescuers have pulled 2 people from the rubble of a collapsed building under construction in the Philippines, bringing the death toll to 3, officials have said, as crews continue search and rescue operations at the site. One of the 2 victims had a pulse when he was retrieved, but later died, while another suffered cardiac arrest while still trapped. Maria Leah Sajili, an information officer at Bureau of Fire Protection, said in a phone interview with the Reuters news agency on Monday. Nairobi, Kenya, when African leaders gathered in Addis Ababa on May 25, 1963, to found the Organization of African Unity, OAU. The occasion became a symbol of continental liberation that many still call Africa Liberation Day. 63 years later, as the continent marks Africa Day 2026, questions over what liberation really means still linger. What was once defined by flags and anthems is now increasingly seen through debates about who controls wealth, technology and global influence, and how that control shapes everyday life across the continent.
The precise structure of these bilateral and trilateral deals remains largely opaque, but it is highly likely that many are being settled outside the traditional oil trading system, either through currencies other than the US dollar or through informal barter arrangements. The United States dollar-dominated global oil trading system is being tested by the US-Israeli war on Iran and the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, as governments in major consuming nations turn to increasingly opaque deals with Tehran and Gulf producers to secure supplies. The question should never be about who is at the receiving end at any given point in time. An assault on an individual or institution's freedom is an assault on everyone's freedoms. Last week, 600 journalists from all over the country lent their voice to a declaration rejecting a law that has unreasonably limited the constitutionally guaranteed freedom of speech granted to every citizen under Article 19. Having gathered in Islamabad for a convention titled Media Laws, Regulations and Ethics, organised by the Pakistan Federal Union of Journalists, PFUJ, and the Rawalpindi Islamabad Union of Journalists, RIUJ, Pakistani journalists and media practitioners have demanded that Parliament review all laws affecting them that contradict Article 19, while formally rejecting the PECA 2025 amendments, which the declaration terms a draconian black law specifically engineered to facilitate the arm-twisting of journalists and the suppression of Pakistan's media landscape.
In a recent television interview, Rana Sanau-Allah said the government was considering raising the voting age to 25 as part of its deliberations on moving the 28th constitutional amendment. He explained that the proposal aims to align the voting age with the minimum age required to contest elections, which is 25. This is not the first time the Prime Minister's advisor on political and public affairs and a senior figure of the ruling party has said this. In January, he made a similar assertion. Then, as now, his claims were swiftly denied by other ministers who said They were only rumours and disinformation, which was an odd way to counter their senior colleague's pronouncement. Sanala did, however, say that while the proposal was being discussed, it was not an official party position for now. Significantly, he added that if consensus emerges on the idea, it could be implemented.
Pakistan and China celebrated the 75th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations on May 21. The events held around these celebrations underscore that the relationship between the two countries is entering a new phase characterised by greater financial integration, expanding subnational cooperation and renewed geopolitical cooperation. What began as a strategic and political partnership has gradually evolved into one of Pakistan's most critical economic relationships. Today, China is one of Pakistan's largest bilateral creditors, a major investor in infrastructure and energy, and an increasingly important source of financial stability for Islamabad during periods of economic stress.
Pakistan's obsession with everything Bakr Eid is hard to overstate. Whether it's young boys heading to the mandi every other night to size up animals, uncles asking the price outside your house, or families having barbecues for the entire week. The festival generates a level of commercial and cultural energy that few other events in the country can match. And all of that energy translates into an enormous amount of money changing hands, almost entirely cash. More than 7 million animals were sacrificed nationally in 2025, according to the Pakistan Tanneries Association, with total estimated sales of roughly 600 billion. Few other segments of the economy concentrate this much money in so few places over such a short period. The activity clusters around a small number of large mandis, often at city outskirts, where buyers and sellers carry large sums across distances with real risks of theft and counterfeit notes. It is precisely the kind of environment where digital payments should, in theory, take off. No wonder the State Bank has been trying to do exactly that since 2024 through its Go Cashless in Cattle Markets campaign, which has now entered its third year.
With Eid al-Azha approaching, cattle markets are buzzing as families seek to participate in Qurbani within their means. While individual Qurbani remains the preferred choice, rising costs are pushing many middle-class households towards collective arrangements. As a result, demand for larger animals has been growing faster than for goats and lambs in recent years. To avoid the logistical hassle while retaining the spirit of giving, many young professionals are increasingly opting for online Qurbani services, where meat and hides are donated to charitable causes. Several major meat merchant chains and leading charitable entities are offering a range of tailored packages to tap this demand and appeal to diverse segments of consumers.
Cuba has announced the first shipment in an expected donation from China of about 60,000 tons of rice, as the Caribbean island contends with an ongoing humanitarian crisis. In a series of social media posts on Sunday, Cuban President Miguel Diaz-Canel confirmed that the first load of 15,000 tons had arrived a day earlier in the port of Havana. Ecuadorian President Daniel Noboa has used his State of the Union speech to tout his United States-backed crime-fighting strategies as well as improvements to the economy. During the National Assembly in the capital Quito on Sunday, Noboa cited the extradition of a dozen crime bosses to the US and the seizure of almost 300 tons of drugs as examples of what he described as his decisive and effective approach.
Baltimore, United States. Muslim Americans are grieving after two gunmen last week opened fire at the Islamic Center of San Diego, killing 3 people. But at the annual conference for the Islamic Circle of North America, ICNA, in Baltimore, community leaders stressed the urgency of turning the sorrow into action.
For nearly 20 years, Mario Habib has run a barbershop in Beirut's Fern El Chebak neighborhood. Through wars, economic collapse and political crisis in Lebanon, Mario says many customers now come not just for haircuts, but for relief, conversation and a sense of normal life in a country where, as he puts it, normal life itself became the dream.
I recently had the opportunity to sit down with Francis de Souza, COO of Google Cloud, backstage at an event in Los Angeles. Amid the din around us, de Souza, who speaks in the calm, measured manner of a university professor, offered useful advice for companies navigating the AI security moment we're all living through, noting that there'll be a transition period. And then I think we get to this better place. He wasn't speaking about Google at that moment, but it's clear that even Google is still figuring things out. The Speaker of Senegal's parliament says he is resigning 2 days after his close ally was fired as Prime Minister in a deepening political crisis. The move by Speaker El Malik Ndiaye clears the way for sacked Premier Ousmane Sonko to run for the post of Head of Parliament, where his PASTEF party holds a strong majority.
US President Donald Trump has instructed his negotiators not to rush into a deal with Iran after reports suggested an agreement was close. According to US media reports, the deal under discussion involves a 60-day ceasefire extension, reopening the Strait of Hormuz, and further negotiations over Iran's nuclear program.
Israeli strikes have killed at least 6 people in southern Lebanon as the Israeli army issues fresh evacuation orders. Israeli air raids in Al-Namiria killed 2 young men who were riding on a motorcycle, and another young man in Al-Duwar was also killed while he was on a motorcycle, according to Lebanon's national news agency, NNA.